Tonight we are really happy to 2 weeks in a row to have one of our own presenting, and so Jillian Flavin is also in the same category that Kelly was last week, where she was not doing the Ocean Coastal Resource Management concentration, but was really interested in some research that was analogous and interesting to us, so we gave her a little bit of support to help her with her summer project, which she's going to talk about today. And she's been working with Think Beyond Plastics and Daniela Russo, who's building this new center for the Sam Farr Center for Innovation at M.B.A, and we're going to be working very closely with them. So we look at Jillian as kind of the test case for this new relationship we're building, and really looking forward to hearing about your work. So let's give her a welcome.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Just like Jason said, I worked with Reef Beyond Plastic this summer in the Bay Islands of Honduras on a project that I'll discuss in much more detail. And I'm also a second-year M.B.A. IEP student here, and on my second and final year. And so let's get this going. I really want to talk to everybody about not only the obstacles, but the opportunities that plastics have in the MesoAmerican Reef and then around the world as well. I think with innovation and with business, there can be a lot done about plastic pollution, and a lot of opportunities can be had. So it's not just an obstacle. So first of all, I want you guys to imagine a Caribbean beach. Imagine the sun on your skin. Imagine the turquoise water. Imagine the wind blowing through your hair.
I would imagine that.
And then you're probably imagining something like this. This is a beach in the west end of Roatan. This is where I spent my summer. And this is where millions of tourists from all over the world come to experience the Roatan, the beach, the water, the coral, the reef. But what a lot of people don't see and what a lot of people don't expect to see is this. This is also in the Bay Islands of Honduras, and this is on the island of Utila, and this is a very common sight. And so Think Beyond Plastic has been working down in this region to really try to find solutions to beaches that are littered with plastic. As I'm sure most of you know, this is not just a unique circumstance in the Bay Islands, but this happens all over the world. So let's talk a little bit about how we can fix places like this. So I want to start with a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, which says, "Do what you can with what you have where you are." If your beaches are littered with plastic, if you have a lot of plastic on your island, if there's a problem staring you in the face, do something with what you have right there, but also bring in a little innovation. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the problem, a little bit about Think Beyond Plastic. I'm going to go into the MesoAmerican Reef and the Bay Islands. And then I'm going to talk about the work that I did, my Bay Islands assessment and my field work and my time there. And then I'm going to talk to you about what we're doing to move forward. And then if you guys have any questions, please save them for the end, and I'll make sure that we have plenty of time to go through those. Okay, so what's the problem? The problem is that 8.3 billion metric tons of plastic exist on this earth right now. And 8.3 billion metric tons is equivalent to about the weight of 80 million blue whales, just to kind of put it into perspective. And another big problem is that only 9% of this is recycled, which means that we're sending billions of tons of plastic to landfills, the natural environment, and then into our oceans as well. So annually, about 8 million tons of plastic enter the marine environment. And scientists estimate that this is the equivalent of one dump truck dumping their contents of the truck into the ocean every single minute. Just to give you a picture of what that really means. So plastics and people are on the rise. Global plastic production has increased 20-fold since 1964, and the trend is likely to continue as the global population creeps towards 10 billion people within the next 35 years. And this growth is concentrated mostly around the coastal regions, including Central America and the Caribbean, which is right up there in that area. So what's more is that this 8.3 billion metric tons that I just mentioned earlier is anticipated to reach 34 billion metric tons by 2050 if we don't do anything about it, which is the equivalent of the weight of over 100,000 Empire State Buildings. It's a lot. And if nothing is done, that 12 billion metric tons of plastic will end up as plastic waste by 2050. And just to remind you, 2050 is in 33 years. It's not really that far away. So how does plastic waste get into the ocean? So the 6 degrees of separation is to help people who live in cities or maybe areas that are not very, very close to the ocean understand. A plastic bag or a piece of plastic that gets put into a garbage can, somehow through transportation and through the wind, it falls out. It goes into a gutter, a storm drain, and then from there it goes into a river, some kind of river stream, and then into the ocean, where a marine animal might eat it, or it might take a long time to decompose, but it's in the ocean. In places like the Bay Islands, we don't even have to have, there is no 6 degrees of separation. Plastic waste goes directly into the ocean in a lot of these places because the dumps butt up right against a marine environment, which is a big problem. So if current trends continue, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish by 2050. So just keep that in mind, and that's only if current trends continue. So this is it's up to you guys to do something about it. And so what are the impacts of plastic? So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions. You can see the years next to the Starbucks cup, both of the one for the Americano and then the one for the iced coffee. They're both there. And so I'm not going to ask you exactly how long you think it takes to biodegrade, but just think about it. Just think about it for one more second. Okay, so the coffee cup, the hot coffee, it's about 50 years. So, the next time you're going for a coffee, Americano, extra room, think about bringing your own cup. And of course, no one's perfect, but it's important to know how long these things take to biodegrade in the ocean. And then what about that iced coffee with extra room for cream? What about that one? It's about 450 years, so it's a lot longer because it's made specifically of plastic and not just coated with plastic. So keep that in mind. And the real problem with this is that when plastics go into the ocean, they take a long time to decompose. And as they do it, they break into tiny little pieces of microplastic, which are then eaten by small animals and then eaten by larger animals. And sometimes even larger animals like this fish right here eats the plastic, and you can see that it's in the contents of his stomach. And these microplastics that are floating around in the ocean, they're like little toxic sponges. So they take all kinds of BPAs and all kinds of oils and all kinds of chemicals that are floating around in the ocean, which are a lot, and they just stick to these little nurdles and little pieces of microplastics. And then they end up in the flesh of our food, and then they end up in us. So although the exact health effects of plastics and plastic chemicals in our bodies are not conclusive, it's highly likely that they inhibit immune function, they cause other ailments like diabetes, liver malfunctioning, and potentially cancer. I mean, it's a very highly debated topic at this time, and so you can imagine, I'm sure that a lot more will go into it. And I also want to notice this balloon, this happy birthday balloon. That might be an exaggeration, but either way, if it's someone's birthday, maybe try to get them a bouquet of flowers instead. I don't like balloons. Okay, so what are some other impacts? Maybe for us animal lovers out there. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad for animals. So wildlife and natural ecosystems also suffer, with an estimated 1 million seabirds and 100,000 marine mammals and sea turtles dying each year from eating plastic. And this doesn't only cause a problem for the animals, but it causes a problem for people who rely on healthy marine ecosystems for their livelihoods, like they do in the Bay Islands and MIIS. So this is where Think Beyond Plastic comes in. So Think Beyond Plastic is a business accelerator, and they work with businesses from around the world to help them bring their ideas for solving pollution plastic issues all the way to market. So they provide them consultancy service for small business startups. They provide them introductions with impact investors who are eager to invest in their ideas. And they also create a landscape and an environment where they can actually bring their business to market. And so Reef is a company that takes plastic PET bottles, which you could get soda or water just down at the store, and they take them, they recycle them, and then they turn them into filament, 3D filament, that then they use to print things like jewelry, vases, snorkel equipment, really anything that you can print with a 3D printer, they can do that. Or they will be doing it in the process. They're still prototyping, but they're doing a great job. The Corable right here, does anyone know what this is? Has anyone heard of this? Yeah?
It's, you put it in your dryer or your washer?
Exactly, exactly. So this is also made from recycled PET bottles. And this, you can throw it into your washing machine and it catches all of the synthetic fibers that come off your synthetic clothes, which is, we're now realizing is another huge problem for ocean health. So these innovative business models are essential in progressing the new plastics economy, which diverts from the linear economy of using an item and then throwing it away. It embraces a circular model that reduces sending valuable goods to the landfill or to an incineration station. This model also reduces the use of virgin plastics, which currently account for about 90% of produced plastics, and thus it reduces our dependence on oil, because plastics are more or less pretty intensive for oil purposes. And so the circular economic model and businesses like these can really help reduce plastic waste around the world and then help build more resilient communities. So think beyond plastic. Their main focus is on entrepreneurship and innovation, but over time and then through experience with this project in the MesoAmerican Reef, we realize that education and policy are also very important parts of creating an ecosystem where these kinds of businesses can thrive. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this trifecta as we move through this story. So the MesoAmerican Reef, has anyone been to the MesoAmerican Reef? Yeah, a couple people. Yeah, so as I'm sure that a few people can attest to, it's a beautiful place. It is the second largest barrier reef in the world, dwarfed only by the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. It stretches from the northern part of the Yucatan Peninsula up here in Cancun, and it goes all the way down to the Bay Islands of Honduras. This area is home to 65 species of coral, 500 species of fish. It provides habitat for 7 endangered turtles, including the hawksbill turtle, seen here. And it's one of the only places in the world you can see whale sharks year-round. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit on the Bay Islands. So I'm going to talk about these in a little detail because they're very different, the size of the population, and just want to give you a little context into that. So Utila is the smallest. It's 17 square miles and it has 5,000 people who live there. Roatan is 32 square miles and 55,000 people live on the island, so it's a substantially larger population. And then Guanaja, also known as the Green Island, is 19 square miles and has about 8,000 people that are living there. So all of these islands have a mix of culture and language with a blend of native islanders, Hondureños from the mainland, and expats living there together. And interestingly enough, English is very commonly spoken because it was colonized by the English centuries ago, but Spanish is the official language and is also commonly spoken. Just a little background. So all of the islands have very distinct qualities, but what they do have in common is the natural beauty that gives them the reputation for being the last virgin island, or the crown jewel of the Caribbean. And with a reputation like this, it's really no surprise why so many tourists want to go visit. Which brings us to tourism on the island. So, as you can imagine, tourism is a big economic driver on these islands, especially in Roatan, which sees nearly 1 million visitors annually. And they mostly come in from the 2 cruise ship terminals that they have there on the island. Tourism has indeed provided economic opportunities, but it has also led to environmental degradation through really the sheer volume of resources used by tourists and the increased amount of people who have migrated there from the mainland in order to embrace these economic opportunities. So these factors, coupled with other key challenges, make the Bay Islands a hotspot for plastic waste pollution. So this pile of plastic bottles, this is taken on the island of Guanaja, and this was actually collected in 1 month by 2 men who have water taxis. So on the island of Guanaja, they don't have very good infrastructure on land, so they use water taxis to get around. And these, during their trips, when they happened to come by a bottle floating in the water, they would just pick it up and then pop it in this pile, and this is what they came up with in a month. So it's a pretty substantial amount of plastic. And this was just when we went there this summer. I took this picture. So in addition to tourism, increased migration because of tourism, really a lack of adequate waste management, and a disposable lifestyle that brings plastic bottles and single-use plastics to the island, it's all contributing to really waste that's out of control. Another thing is that ocean currents in this area bring massive amounts of waste that come off the mainland Honduras. There's a big river that splits Guatemala and Honduras. It brings a lot of waste from there to the islands, which makes this issue with plastic pollution very front and center to a lot of people, including the mayor of Guanaja, which is where this picture was taken. So he reached out to Think Beyond Plastic in 2014 and was looking for ways to find solutions to the plastic issue on his island. After an initial assessment by the Think Beyond Plastic team, it became obvious that the amount of plastic items being used really needed to be better assessed, and they needed to do some more investigation as to how to fix the potential issues. So they did an initial assessment, and they identified plastic hotspots, particularly with plastic items. And they identified, especially on the island of Guanaja and around the Bay Islands in general, that plastic bags were a huge problem. So they worked with Mayor Spurgeon, who's the mayor of Guanaja, and they helped implement a plastic bag ban, and they also helped supplement this ban with alternatives. So they were able to get funding to help provide a bag for each person on a small little Banaka Key is what they call it. It's an island that's off the island of Guanaja, but is where the main center is. So that's really important because it was successful, and we'll go talk more about that as we move on. And they also started a lot of plastic education at the schools to really inform kids and inform people about why you don't want to use a lot of plastic, why it's better to refuse a plastic bag if you don't need it, which are things that I think, especially with this group, we take for granted that, oh, I shouldn't have a plastic bag, I shouldn't have this, shouldn't have that, but that's not common knowledge for a lot of people all over the world. Okay, so now we're going to kind of go into what I did. So I conducted an assessment on the quantity of plastics and plastic alternative products being used on all 3 of the Bay Islands. So that includes straws, plates, plastic plates, and styrofoam plates is included in this assessment. Takeout food containers, cups, bags, forks, knives, spoons, and individual use PET bottles. That's for water, soda, and juice. I also assessed the interest in plastic alternatives, and mostly if they were already using plastic alternatives, and figure out an estimate of how much they're currently paying. So in total, I interviewed 136 people through in-person surveys conducted at specifically businesses in Roatan, Guanaja, and Utila. So what do I mean when I say plastic alternative products? So I really mean anything that can be replaced. So instead of a plastic straw, it's a paper straw. Instead of a plastic cup, it's a paper cup. And it's not necessarily just paper, but maybe anything that's made with sustainable materials. So including bagasse, which is a sugarcane fiber. And so I looked at specifically takeout containers, plates, bags, straws, and everything that I mentioned in the other slide except for with an alternative. I should find my notes. Okay, we'll go into it in more detail, so please don't worry. I know you're just chomping at the bit. Okay, so I want to talk a little more about the specific quirks of each island, just to kind of give you a good overview of exactly how the culture is before we dive into the results. So Roatan, like I said, they have 1 million tourists annually. They have amazing dive sites that are very close to the shore, white sandy beaches, zip lining, everyone's happy and having fun at the mega resorts and high-end restaurants. And then on the other side of the island, the central and east side of the island in particular, there are convenience stores, pulperias, which are one-room convenience stores that typically sell any kind of food. Baleada is the main food of the region, which is a delicious treat. And so as you can imagine, there's very different perceptions of plastic and plastic use. The Think Beyond Plastic team, they notice that when they go to Roatan now and to all of the islands, people are much more aware in the more lucrative and high-educated places about the importance of using alternative products. But it's not necessarily so in the places that are not as economically prosperous. And there are a couple of reasons why that is. I think one is because we haven't targeted our education towards them. And another one is because when you're living at the poverty line, it's difficult to really think about things that are, you don't know nothing about, and you're just trying to feed your families. So that's one thing. Inconsistent trash and recycle pickup was a big issue. Roatan had some of the best waste management out of all 3 islands, but still they come once or twice a week maybe. They don't come to all they don't go all around the island all the time. Recycling, they don't have trash receptacles. So that was something that people said over and over, is that we need trash receptacles. And instead of having dumpsters that the trash trucks would come and pick it up, it was like boards built, little baskets built out of boards that people would just throw their trash in. It was piling over all the time. I should have put a picture in here, sorry. And so it's a big issue. For recycling, there is no municipality provided recycling system. It's all done by a private company and then families of waste pickers who live at the dump. And they collect bottles and then bring them to the main center. And then from there, they're sold to the recycling center on the mainland, and that's how they make their living. So everything is shipped off the island. Because of the decrease in oil costs, it's not becoming as lucrative to do recycling, so it's declining. So Utila, beautiful 80+ dive sites, whale shark sightings all year. Remember, 5,000 people live on this island as opposed to 55,000 people in Roatan. So they're a very tight-knit community. There's locals, there's a lot of backpackers who come in and stay for 3 to 6 months to do their dive masters. And because of this influence and this influx of these more or less well-educated tourists, that's long-term tourists that stay for several months, it's really established this culture of plastic conscious, plastic free, plastic this, plastic that. I mean, people will go to the bars for Tequila Tuesdays and they'll bring their own little shot glasses because they're being environmentally friendly. And I mean, it's great, and they do a lot of no plastic pledges, and because they are the demand, they are the economic driver, and they're there for several months, they really have a sense of ownership, these backpackers, and then it's kind of really shifted the whole culture on islands. It's very interesting. There's local beach cleanups and recycling collection that's coordinated by just regular citizens, and the municipality also provides a lot of recycling. They pick up the plastic bottles, and the mayor of Utila is collecting all the plastic bottles so he can build a road out of plastic. He's been talking about it all summer. Hasn't happened yet, but I'm following up. I'm hoping it will. He's got big dreams. Okay, so Guanaja, last one. Guanaja is the green island. The primary source of income are fishing, shrimping, and tourism. Because it is so difficult to get to this island, even though it's so close, a lot of tourists don't go here. And also because of the difficulties in transportation, they're not able to ship the bottles off of the island, the plastic bottles, as easily as they are in the other two. So because of that, this is why Mayor Spurgeon, the Green Island champion, was really adamant about having something done with it. And when I say the Green Island, they have plans to make the island plastic-free within 3 to 5 years, and they're also going to start incorporating climate change education into their primary schools and secondary schools, which is really great. So they had the plastic bag ban, as did all of the islands, but this is the only island in which it was successful. On the other islands, people protested and were very upset. Even on Utila, it didn't work. And what they would say to the big guys, the big grocery stores that were trying to follow the rules and really make a difference, they said, I'm just going to shop somewhere else. And one of the grocery stores on Utila, they said they lost 20% of the revenue in a month because people were pissed. And that is we're all happy and having a good time. So my point is that a champion who enforces this legislation is really what you need. And then I think the alternative bags that we provided them is also what happened and what made it a successful endeavor. Okay guys, now I'm going to the real hard, nitty-gritty stuff. Okay, so I interviewed 72 businesses on Roatan. I assessed that the island uses over 43 million units of plastic and plastic alternative products each year. So as you can see, plastic straws and plastic and styrofoam plates are the number 2 plastic items that are used most frequently, and then paper cups are by far used most frequently as well. Roatan, because of its size, because of the influx of tourism, is responsible for 81% of all plastic use out of all of the Bay Islands, and 93% of all plastic alternative use. So one of my recommendations is that moving forward, to really nail down this problem with plastic pollution and plastic alternatives, Roatan needs to be the focus. And 72 businesses reported using plastic alternatives. So in this picture, it's kind of hard to see, but this is one of the mega resorts in the West Bay. Talking to them, he's having a great time at the pool bar. And then over here, this is a street vendor who is selling the best tortillas and chicken and other vegetarian options that you would ever want to try. And she did a great job because she used actual ceramic plates instead of styrofoam plates, which is very, very common over there. Okay, so on Utila, they use in total 3.2 million units of plastic and plastic alternative products. As you can see, plastic straws were once again the primary culprit here, just behind plastic bags and plastic soda and juice bottles. I'm not sure how many of you have traveled to Latin America, but the soda and juice culture is out of this world. We'll see the numbers. If you want to look at, just look at the single-use PET soda juice bottles, 389,000. This is on Utila, 5,000 people, and then I'm just going to switch over to Guanaja real quick, so you can see single-use PET soda juice bottles, 874,000. So it's nearly, what is that? Well, it's pretty high. I guess it's proportionate to the size of the island, but still, my point is that this is it's a big opportunity for change. So plastic straws here, I surveyed 29 businesses. Plastic straws are the key culprit. PET, soda, juice bottles, et cetera, et cetera. The most interesting thing about Guanaja is that they don't have any access to plastic alternative products like paper straws, paper takeout containers, and paper plates. So the only one that responded no to all of these. But the interesting thing is that here at the convenience store, instead of providing plastic bags, they provide boxes, this was the only place that I saw that on the Bay Islands. Okay, so in summary, 71 bars and restaurants were surveyed, 35 grocery, convenience, and gift stores, 25 hotels and resorts, 5 street vendors on all 3 islands. And this is just kind of a summary of the overall findings. In total, the Bay Islands use over 41 million units of plastic every year. And then they also use over 10 million units of plastic alternatives or paper products every year as well. So what this really shows is that, yes, a lot of plastic is being used, but yes, there's also interest in alternative products. Some things that we have to assess moving forward, however, is what are these paper cups made out of? Where are they sustainably sourced? You know, the paper cups that are currently used now are not the majority of them. So what does that mean for how they're impacting the dumps, how they're impacting the oceans, how they're impacting where they're coming from, really? So it's a whole can of worms that we'll be getting into. But mostly plastic straws and paper cups are the most commonly used items. An alternative to plastic and styrofoam plates are really needed. I'll go into the cost difference in a little bit and talk more about that. But another thing is that Roatan uses 5 times more disposable products than Utila and Guanaja combined, which is why our efforts really need to be focused on Roatan moving forward. And then policy and enforcement matters. Guanaja used the least amount of plastic bags as compared to population, and it was because of this successful ban. And then the lack of access to a reliable supply of these plastic alternative products is really a barrier to adoption, is what we also saw. So price comparisons, how much does all this cost? Paper cups from La Cerveceria, which is one of the main providers of paper cups. They also provide beer, they provide Coke. They provide these paper cups in bulk, and so does Roatan Marine Park, which is an NGO, and they're actually cheaper than the plastic cups that you can buy from the store. And the key is the bulk. So as you're buying in bulk, the prices go down, and when you're buying plastic cups from the store, it's not the case. Culturally, people who are not necessarily informed as to the harms of plastic cups will still choose to use plastic if given an option because it has a superior image to more of the native and Hondurans that live there. Paper straws are twice the price of plastic straws, which is something that needs to be addressed. Paper plates are less expensive than plastic plates, but they're not as durable. So the real issue was that they have meals with a bunch of soups and stuff like that, and the paper plates weren't doing it, they were too flimsy. So finding an alternative that works for them is key. But the Bagasse biodegradable takeout containers are 3 times the cost of the styrofoam takeout containers. So that is a real barrier as well. So moving forward, we're going to be supporting the development of a plastic alternative supplier on the islands, most likely on the island of Roatan. And we really need to make sure that we're fostering relationships with the grocery stores and with the NGOs that are already providing these plastic alternative products. We also need to find affordable replacement for plastic and styrofoam plates, and amongst other things. But the key idea here is that if you can lower the cost by buying things in bulk, so getting them most likely from Mexico, ordering them in bulk and shipping containers, then you can have them on site, find an effective and affordable way to distribute them around the islands, and then that can bring down the prices of these alternative products. So that is obviously the main driver, is cost and convenience. So by addressing those 2 issues with this business, we can really, I think, have a big impact. So with research moving forward, we need to assess alternatives to plastic and soda and juice bottles and single-use water bottles because this is a main polluter. We're looking into soda fountains as a way to mitigate the bottles of soda. Glass bottles just don't really work. They break, they're not convenient, things of that nature. And then, surprisingly, this is one of the only places I visited in Latin America that had these. They have these 5-gallon refillable water jugs that you can just take in. They cost 120 lempiras, which is about $5 as a deposit. And then every time you want to fill it up, it's only $1 to fill it up. And so we're really working with them to try to get these. The dive shops have them, in the touristy areas they have them, but really get people to understand and utilize these more because it's a really, really good option. We also want to assess the feasibility of a bamboo product supplier. Bamboo grows really well on the islands, and if there's any kind of way to start creating your own sustainable plastic alternative materials on the island, that would be great. So we're looking into that. And then we're also looking into the feasibility of an industrial compost facility on Roatan. A lot of people are switching to plastic alternatives like the PLA, plant-based plastic cups, which they think is great. But the problem is that if you don't have an industrial composting facility to break these things down, they biodegrade in the same amount of time as just a regular plastic cup once they get into the ocean and then it gets dark and it gets cold. So that's really important to know, I think, as environmental professionals, that that's a good option, but not in every circumstance. So moving forward with policy, we want to make sure that we encourage a ban on plastic straws. Shout out to No Straw November. I'll shout it out one more time, but skip the straw, take action, save the reef. That was a sign that was in Roatan, and on the back it said it in Spanish as well. So we continue, every time we would go and talk to someone, we'd give them this refuse all of these items sticker. And one of my main concerns was that we didn't have them in Spanish. So that's obviously a huge issue that we'll be addressing as we move forward. What else? Increase the number of recycling and trash receptacles. Even just trash receptacles. They have these recycling receptacles. This is at the Monterey Bay cruise ship terminal, and no one picks up the recycling. So they have them there just for looks. So figuring out a way to bring the waste pickers together, which they've been having some issues on their own, I'll tell you about it after, and bringing them together with businesses that are interested in recycling, then that'll help with that problem. But it's just hard. Bringing in innovative businesses who can use these plastic bottles is really the main solution. Okay, so we also are supporting entrepreneurship and education on the islands. We hosted some business development workshops while we were there. There are already groups of women, the Mujeres Artesanas. They create different kinds of art with recycled plastics, with recycled newspapers, or just recycled those little tops to soda cans. And so we were really supporting them and trying to get them into a place where they really need to be. And then the Utila Handmade Co-op on the island of Utila, they collect a bunch of trash and work with kids and create cool things and then sell those to tourists as well. So we're helping support those already existing establishments. We also did an assessment with Reef. I don't know if you recognize this hot mama. If she saw this picture, she'd probably be mad. This is Selena Lima. She's a student here at MIIS, and this is her interviewing the Mayor Spurgeon of Guanaja about the feasibility of bringing Reef to the island. So we're currently assessing that now. We also did outreach and education. We're doing school and some Rotary Club presentations. You might recognize Ariana Alba Ferrari. She was a student here last year, and she's currently in the Bay Islands of Honduras working with Think Beyond Plastic. She was responsible for implementing their environmental education program at the schools, and she was very successful. She trained junior, senior age kids to do a presentation about plastic, gave them leadership skills, really gave them confidence, really helped them, and they went to all of the different schools around the island and were successfully able to reach every single student on Utila, which was awesome. We set up events, beach cleanups, other community engagement activities, and we did some radio and television interviews as well, so pretty nice. So you guys are probably wondering, well, what can I do? What can I do to help reduce plastic waste? And so I'm going to tell you a few ideas. So first of all, use alternative products whenever you can. I think it's just important to keep in mind, especially as busy people who are on the run, you know, getting a coffee on the go. Not everybody's perfect, like I said, but just be mindful about how much plastic you use and try to get a reusable bottle or a reusable cup if you can. Use reusable straws or don't use a straw. I have sensitive teeth. I understand that ice water is really cold if you don't have a straw. So just ask Kayla. I have a bunch of straws at the house, and I can tell you where to get them if you want to come up and talk to me at the break. Reusable cutlery, things like that. I want to show the 4 R's here, not the 3 R's. Refuse has been added on, so if you don't need something, don't use it. And then reduce, reuse, and recycle whenever you can. And clean up your beach. This is actually the beach that was in the first beach in the picture. It's looking cleaner, but this woman in the middle, Tiff, she has been organizing beach cleanups every Monday for the last several years and has been a real leader in her community and has instigated change. So if this is something that you're interested in, reach out to Siobhan at the Oceans Club, reach out to your community, really do something about it. Support social and environmental enterprises. So anyone that uses recycled materials or more sustainable materials to create things, consider buying things from them, buying Christmas gifts from them, maybe even making your own Christmas gifts. I regrettably have some yogurt containers or hummus containers that are plastic, and I don't think that they're really recyclable. So maybe keep them and make them into candles or something. Just get creative. And then take action, which is kind of what all of this is, but No Straw November, we have a girl, Shelby, who is a high school girl who's coming to MIIS in November to talk about the initiative that she's taken, and make sure to support her. And as more or less professionals in this field, it's our responsibility to really mentor the next generation. And so do that, be there for them. And then I also want to point out that Think Beyond Plastic is hosting their 2017 Marine Plastics Innovation Challenge, which I think some students here are participating in. The deadlines are November 20th for applications, and they partner with the UN to encourage university students to come up with ideas, innovative ways of solving this ocean plastic issue. So if you have a good idea, get your team together and submit an application. And then I just want to end with one final quote from Sylvia Earle, one of my favorite women leaders. Hold up a mirror and ask yourself what you're capable of doing and what you really care about. And then take the initiative. Don't wait for someone else to ask you to act. What questions do you guys have?
plastic thing where they are paying who traditionally low-income people to gather the plastics, or they're using the garbage pickers who normally sell to the waste facility. They sell to this company instead at a higher price. And then they're able to take all of the plastics together, no matter the number on the bottom, and merge it together into something that can be used in digital printing or 3D printing, or make fabric out of it. But I haven't heard anything of, and I feel like at the point that one of those businesses gets really economically viable, then people will be like, I want to go collect plastic from the beach, or how can I? But I haven't heard yet that they are economically viable. So you being on the inside, what is the point? So Reflow is still in a prototype model, but have you heard of others who are kind of getting economically viable with this? Or,
yeah, well, I know that there is a company that creates agricultural, the covering for big ag fields.
right.
And I know that they're doing well, I know that they're pursuing these ideas, but it's kind of a hard environment right now because it's still, you're trying to reach that economy of scale. And so I don't know anyone specifically. Daniela Russo will be here October 31st, and she's been working really deeply in that. I was kind of isolated on this project. You know how you get kind of siloed, you don't really figure out what's going on in the whole rest of the company because you're so involved in your own project. But I mean, I'm happy to do a quick Google search with you. You can ask Daniela.
I thought you might know.
I
But
know.
that's okay. And that sock thing, from what I've heard about that, because plastics pick up chemicals, they are using those in the agricultural trenches to not only kind of filter the runoff, but also catch all of their pollutions too.
Right.
So there's potential here.
There's definitely potential.
Market potential.
Absolutely. Yeah, yes.
When you were there, were they talking at all about just doing like these taxation of fees on plastic? Because it sounds like they're doing these piecemeal bans one at a time and upsetting a lot of people at each point in the road. Why don't they just tax the plastic coming in general and drive the price higher than the alternatives?
Right, well, they actually did do that, and the ban expired while I was there. And they're actually, I think it went on for 5 years. And so that is why the waste pickers were even actually doing any of the waste picking, was because they were organized by the the Pepsi and Coke companies. So they were organized by them because they needed someone to come and pick up their trash and then send it off the island. But just this last summer on Roatan, that law it expired. And because they have elections in November, it's still kind of not really sure who's enforcing what, which is kind of something that you see in developing countries, is things are not as necessarily as clear-cut and as back-to-back as they should be, but that is a really good idea, and that's what they did. And so we're following up with that. We still have contacts on the island who are working with the waste pickers to get them reincorporated and really trying to get them to do this again because they stopped. So that's a really good question. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I didn't catch that during your speech, but I'm wondering, do you know any measures taken towards the plastic waste produced by the tourists visiting the island? I assume there's a lot.
There's not really anything, because if they were they're very encouraged to bring as many tourists as they can. And so anything that would inhibit tourism is really not their priority. They recently had a measure in place to protect the reef and protect coastal areas from development, but they just went back on that because they wanted to build some hotels. So it's a very touchy political and social environment right now within the government. And you know, like Patila and Guanaja, unfortunately Roatan doesn't have those mayors who are on board. They're really not interested in this issue at all, to be honest. So hopefully in November, when things change and a new mayor comes on, then hopefully it'll be different. But Roatan is so big, it's divided into 2 jurisdictions. So if you were to have one mayor who was on board, you would still have the dump on the other side. And so there are reasons why we haven't been as successful in Roatan as we have on the other islands. And it's not just because of a lack of education, it's really because of political reasons. questions? Chris?
Did you come across, you mentioned the mayor of one of the islands wanting to make a road out of plastic. That's actually being done already in a few countries. In India, for example, I think they're starting to make like a sort of pavement substance out of it.
Yeah.
Did you come across any ideas for presses or molds to create construction material with?
Right, so actually what
Like bricks, for example?
Right, so we're actually looking into the feasibility of one of those companies that can take plastic bottles and turn them into bricks that can be used for buildings. But with the road, what they actually do is they collect the bottles and they shred them with a very easy shredder. And then they mix them with a chemical compound, with gravel and other things like that, that they actually got the whole mixture approved from an engineering firm in the United States, and so they're going to be using that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so they're trying, Guanajuato's looking into that. Yeah. Kevin?
Were you saying that environmentally conscious backpackers were actually affecting the culture of the region?
Yeah, actually.
It's like the backpacker's dream.
Yeah, amazing. Go to Attila for 3 to 6 months. You'll love it. But yeah, the big influx of tourists, long-term tourists, they're the ones who spend the money. They're the ones who have established a sense of, this is my home now too. I'm here for 3 months. And they've really influenced what is economically feasible for companies, for cafes, for different restaurants. And of course, not all of them have gone for a plastic-free pledge, but it's a very small area, and half of them have started offering plastic alternatives. The rest of them, they understand why, they might not, but it's such a small place that everyone's kind of on the same page.
So,
Sorry, Cass. I have Cass.
oh, sorry.
I was wondering if, two-part question.
Mhm.
That's the voice. I was wondering if the scuba diving shops had any sorts of alliances with the community or with the government to help promote plastic-free? And also, do you recommend going diving?
Oh, yeah, good questions. So, the feeling between the dive shops and the tourism industry with the government on Roatan is they don't really get along very well, because their ideas of what is the right thing to do are so very different, and the government doesn't really listen to them. But on Utila and Guanaja, it's different. There's a lot of connection, a lot of camaraderie. And then, yes, I recommend diving there. It's very beautiful. And snorkeling with the real shark. Zara?
So you mentioned how many businesses you interviewed. What's the percentage of businesses like on the island? Just to get an idea of the number that you came up with. Was there a conservative number or not?
Right.
And what questions did you ask them? Did you look at their budget and how often did you order stuff? And what were their thoughts on alternatives to plastics?
Great questions, Zara. So what I did is I divided my research up into the 4 categories of the types of businesses and then the sizes. So I did small, medium, and large. And then I interviewed 136 businesses, but I estimated that there were probably 470, I think was the number. And so I averaged the numbers that I got from the people that I did survey, and then based on the size and the type of business, gave an allocation to them. So that's how I did it. It's a really good question. And then the surveys were basically, how many straws do you use per month? How much do you pay for them? And sometimes they would give us data, real good data about how much they ordered per month and exactly how much it cost. But other times they'd say, well, I got it at the grocery store. And so we went and we talked to the grocery store. It was kind of a conglomerate of information. So I just took mostly the data that I thought was very valid and used that to assess the price, because some of it was just not really accurate. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask, so I know your focus was all on the islands. You mentioned at the beginning, the big river shooting all the plastic out from the mainland. When you were with Thinking on Plastic, were they talking at all about trying to do similar things on the mainland? Because I know this is very visible, it's where all the tourists go and visit, but the mainland's probably the big potatoes in terms of plastic coming out.
Exactly. And that is something that they're looking into how to approach it. It's very important, but it's, considering how difficult it has been to implement these kinds of programs and things on Roatan, we have to be very strategic, and we're kind of trying to find partners who can help us with it. The Mayor of Guanaja has been really helpful with bridging those gaps, but that is something that they're working on. Ideally, what they would like to do is work in the Bay Islands for a couple more years, and then take this pilot model, get the best practices, and then expand that up MesoAmerican. But I agree with you that those are the big potatoes, and it should be addressed. Yes?
This could be anywhere in the world almost, right? I mean, this issue in developing countries, and I'm wondering why Think Beyond Plastic chose this particular spot to go to.
Right. Well, one of the reasons was because of the Mayor of Guanaja, and another one of the reasons was because they were looking for somewhere that they could be successful in, but also make a big change. And because there were so many tourists here, they saw that there was an economic incentive for people to protect the reef, as opposed to maybe somewhere that, like the mainland Honduras, that's very dangerous and people don't really go there, and it's a hard thing to start out with. And so the whole goal of this project is to create an ecosystem where their businesses can thrive, the ones that they're accelerating. So that's really one of the reasons why they chose the Bay Islands. And as far as why didn't they choose the Hawaiian Islands or somewhere in the South Pacific, besides the Mayor of Guanaja reaching out, I'm not really sure.